When my father, Wang Bingzhang, graduated from McGill University with a PhD in experimental medicine, he had a choice. It was 1982, and he was the first Chinese national to have obtained a graduate degree from a Western university since the founding of the People's Republic of China. He could have returned to his homeland and enjoyed a distinguished career as a medical doctor and researcher, and probably later as a high-ranking bureaucrat. Or he could pursue his deepest conviction. My father believed that the Chinese people deserved a democracy ruled by law, and that he could help achieve it. He chose the latter and founded the Overseas Chinese Democracy Movement. For 20 years, my father worked towards this dream of a democratic China. He started a dissident magazine, founded several opposition organizations, and traveled the world giving speeches to inspire people to share his ideals. In doing so, my father would abandon my family, face unthinkable challenges and setbacks, and sacrifice everything, including, eventually, his own freedom. On June 27, 2002, my father was in Vietnam when he was kidnapped. Beaten and blindfolded, he was forced into China, where he was arrested by Chinese authorities. He was charged with espionage and terrorism. In a miscarriage of justice, he was given a one-day trial held behind closed doors, during which my father was not allowed to speak. No evidence was presented, nor any witnesses called. He was wrongfully convicted, sentenced to life in prison, and has been serving his sentence in solitary confinement ever since. I was 13 years old, living in my hometown of Montreal when my father was kidnapped. His choice of democracy activism over family meant that we had already been estranged for several years. I was reluctant to go to Ottawa for the first press conference calling for his release. I just dreaded having to speak in public about a father I barely knew. But I went because my dad, however inadequate he was as a father, didn't deserve to spend the rest of his life in prison. It's now been over 10 years since I first made the decision to try to win my father's freedom. I've lobbied, spoken, and pleaded on his behalf in Ottawa, Washington, D.C., Geneva, Brussels, and elsewhere. In 2008, I deferred going to university to advocate full-time for his release. But despite my best efforts, the past decade of my father's imprisonment has been marked largely by a sense of defeat. It's difficult to describe the challenge of trying to win the support of the American and Canadian governments, and the helplessness I feel when confronting an adversary as formidable as the Chinese government. It's even harder to talk about watching my father lose his mind in solitary confinement. Overwhelmed by disappointment, there is a shameful part of me that would like to move on with my life, give up, and leave my father's fate to destiny. But in the past 10 years, I've had the education one doesn't get in school. I get to meet and bond with other individuals who lived through persecution in China. I see their scars from torture, listen to their stories of escape, and watch in awe of them persevere as political refugees in North America. These are Falun Gong practitioners, Christian organizers, whole communities of Uyghurs and Tibetans, and other activists and their families who have suffered immensely for struggling for their causes. I've also befriended the most ordinary individuals with no political agenda, whose lives have been devastated for protesting injustices such as wrongful forced evictions. They remind me that what I'm doing is part of something bigger than just trying to win my father's release. And although it's painful, it is my responsibility to keep going. I don't have my father's idealism, his gift for rhetoric, nor his brazen defiance against the Chinese communist regime. Between my aversion for politics and my fear of public speaking, I'm embarrassed by how much I still struggle when advocating on his behalf. But despite my being such an unlikely human rights advocate, I know I have to continue to speak out about my father and other prisoners of conscience who continue to languish in Chinese prisons. Because if I don't speak out, how can I expect anyone else to care? Because if I don't speak out, who should? I have to tell the world what human rights abuse in China looks like by sharing my family's experience. I think my father felt a similar sense of duty. He loved medicine and he loved his family, but above all, my father loved his country. His talent, his passion for freedom, and his optimism, he felt he owed it all to his people, and I know he has no regrets. So if I cannot secure his release, I don't want his sacrifice to have been in vain. In the end, our choices are ours alone to make. I've witnessed my father make difficult choices, and I know what it's like to make them myself. The challenges you and I face are different, but if my father can endure his suffering, and I can stand on this stage, I know that you too can make sacrifices, confront your fears, and ultimately choose to speak up for truth. Thank you.